Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 4 to do another Commander review in World of Warships Legends. Today we'll be looking at Karl von Müller in the 6th installment of The Man, the Math, the Legend. Like my ship reviews, I'm going to start out talking a little bit about the history of the man, then we'll move into his place in the game, his abilities, and of course, inspirations. As usual, I should have left an index down in the description if you do want to skip around. Karl Friedrich Max von Müller was born June 16, 1873, in Hanover. He was the son of a Prussian army officer, and his early life seemed to hint that he would follow in his father's footprints when he joined the Army Academy at Schleswig-Holstein. Had he stayed there, we probably would not be talking about him on this channel, but at age 18, he transferred to the German Imperial Navy. Relatively early in his career, he was transferred to SMS Schwalbe, which was deployed to German East Africa, where he would contract malaria, an illness that would trouble him for all his life. Upon his return to Germany, he was a gunnery officer aboard the pre-dreadnought Kaiser Wilhelm II, and then on the staff of Prince Heinrich of Prussia. Having impressed his commanding officers, he was appointed Korvettenkapitän in December 1908. His first and last command would be on the infamous SMS Emden, nicknamed the Swan of the East. The Emden has some connection to Legends, being that she is the only other ship in the Dresden class, which is of course the Tier 1 German tech tree ship in the game. Before the breakout of World War I, the Emden was docked at Qingdao, China, the primary German port in the area, and one that was not favorably located should the British, Japanese, French, or Russian navies come looking for a fight. So on the dawn of war, von Müller would take his ship to sea to meet another naval legend at the Marianas Islands, Maximilian von Spee, the leader of the East Asia Squadron. Von Spee intended to collect his ships and head back to Germany, as operating a squadron was impractical with almost no friendly ports from which to operate. Von Müller convinced him that while operating a squadron might have been impractical, perhaps a single daring cruiser could be more successful. Impressed with this idea, von Müller sailed west towards the Indian Ocean, while von Spee and the rest of his squadron moved east. Over the course of the next few months, von Müller began disrupting marine commerce in the region, taking several prizes before heading to Madras. He arrived only days after the Royal Navy had certified the port as open for business. Von Müller and the Emden shelled the Burma Oil Company, causing a massive fire that resulted in the loss of as much as 500,000 gallons of oil. This was a considerable loss for the Royal Navy and a black eye for the Empire. After this, curiously, von Müller actually headed to Diego Garcia, a port controlled by the British Empire. The island colony was so remote, though, that the population there was actually completely unaware that there was a war going on. The British therefore welcomed, repaired, and resupplied the Emden before she took to sea, capturing or sinking a dozen more merchant ships. The next major exploit for von Müller and the Emden was the Battle of Penang in Malaysia, where the Emden found the Russian cruiser Zemchug at harbor. Though the Russian ship was certainly capable of damaging the lightly armored Emden, that would prove considerably more difficult with her crew partying, having set no watch, and the commanding officer ashore presumably visiting his mistress. The Emden fired 2 torpedoes, with the second appearing to have caused a detonation inside the Russian ship, which broke in half and quickly sunk. Shortly thereafter, a French destroyer, the Musquet, engaged the Emden, but she was hopelessly outgunned. Having missed with her torpedoes, she was easily taken apart by the highly accurate, and no, I'm not joking, fire from the German cruiser. The Emden couldn't avoid her pursuers forever, though. More than 20 ships had been sortied against the Swan of the East, and on November 9, 1914, Her Majesty's Australian ship, Sydney, a much more modern and powerful vessel, finally caught up with her. The Sydney sported 6-inch guns and a higher top speed. The Emden's 4.1-inch guns were capable of technically damaging her, but von Müller judged that she could only really sink the faster cruiser with a torpedo hit, so he ordered the Emden to turn in. The Australians were wise to this, keeping their distance, and picked apart the older and more lightly armored cruiser, hitting her more than 100 times. Seeing the hopelessness of the situation, von Müller beached the Emden to try to spare the lives of his remaining crew. He would spend the next 4 years as a prisoner of war. Upon his return to Germany after the war, von Müller was celebrated as a hero. He was awarded the Blue Max, also known as the Pour le Mérite or Verdienstorden in French and German respectively, the highest military award in Germany at the time, also the Iron Cross, and was promoted to Kapitän zur See. He retired only months later due to his health. Soft-spoken, he refused to write a book about his exploits, though people in Germany and abroad would have been only too happy to read it, and died just a few years later in 1923. Von Müller is included in legends not just for his success though, even though he had a lot of it, capturing or sinking 25 merchant vessels and relieving the British Empire of freight worth around £400 million when adjusted for inflation. The British Empire actually did something somewhat uncharacteristic as a result of von Müller's success. They reduced shipping in the region by as much as 60%. Even more than that, I will read to you something printed in the Daily Telegraph, a British newspaper, while I leave you with this additional clip from the New York Times. It is almost in our heart to regret that the Emden has been captured or destroyed. We certainly hope that the commander, Karl von Müller, has not been killed, for, as the phrase goes, he has shown himself an officer and a gentleman. He has been enterprising, cool, and daring in making war on our ships, and has revealed a nice sense of humor. He has, moreover, shown every consideration to the crews of his prizes. So far, over 74,000 tons of shipping without the loss of a single life. There is not a survivor who did not speak well of this young German, the officers under him, and the crew obedient to his orders. The war on the seas will lose some of its piquancy, its humor, and interest now that the Emden is gone, but she had to go because she was so expensive. Indeed, Karl von Müller is included essentially because he willingly fought impossible odds for his country and conducted himself with such gallantry as to command even the respect of his enemies. I've also left some additional information and links below if you would like some more information on Karl von Müller, the exploits of the Emden, and the tale of her crew. In World of Warships Legends, Karl von Müller is the offensive German cruiser commander, and as such, he's probably the more popular of the two dedicated cruiser captains, the other of course being Günther Lutyens. Having an opportunity to improve the performance of your guns in pretty much every slot, he's well paired for German cruisers who have exceptional damage, but somewhat unimpressive penetration at range. Von Müller offers German captains, and potentially all cruisers, with the opportunity to close into those ranges quicker through his base trait, but this also works on French and Russian ships if you would like to relocate more quickly. As we get into von Müller's abilities, the way that I do this is to give you some visual indication of how strong I consider each of these choices, and then we'll run down each of those choices for you. With that up, let's just move right into slot 1, and here you have the choice between Burn It Down and Beyond Range. I can definitely see an argument for either one of these choices, and I generally keep it on Burn It Down, which is why I've given it my recommendation. This does a fairly simple thing. It increases the odds that you light your enemies on fire while using HE. I prefer this for 2 reasons. Essentially, though neither one of these choices are bad. The first is that you do a lot of lighting things on fire as a cruiser in general, and at medium and longer ranges, it's often a wise idea to be shooting HE, even in your German cruisers. Yes, the damage is bad, but your AP penetration falls off rather quickly, and particularly against angled and maneuvering targets, you often don't come away with much of anything using AP. A fire is going to help you do sustained damage, and if you close into short range, this sets you up nicely for torpedoes if your target happens to burn his damage control. Also of note, this bonus does apply to secondary guns, which are admittedly mostly pointless, unfortunately, and I will admit that this basically only applies to the tier 7 right now. But I generally do walk away with a few dozen hits whenever I run Hipper or Prinz Eugen. A free fire is always nice to get. The other reason is basically because of the negative effects I find on range with German cruisers, and thus why I prefer it over reaching out. The further away you are, the less your turtleback armor counts. Admittedly, this is only really a concern at top tiers, and though you can get a range in the Hipper in excess of 18 kilometers, trying to go toe-to-toe with cruisers and battleships at extreme range doesn't seem to be embracing what you're really good at with those higher level German cruisers. So, to me, the skill is more attractive at low levels, where I wanted a little more distance between me and the battleships because of their relatively poor accuracy at those tiers, and because, though armed with torpedoes, I may not really be a true brawler. So it probably won't be a huge surprise that I'm probably going to recommend fire in the second slot as well. All of the same logic applies here as in the first slot, with the fire chance being often your best option at medium or longer ranges for doing more sustained damage, and this is going to also give you a little bit more love on your secondaries once again. If you want to increase your chance of detecting torpedoes though, then I would go with the German specific ability with the French name, Exposé. This is going to add several hundred meters to the detectability of torpedoes, though only while you have your excellent German hydroactive. For context, why I would recommend this over before it's too late, if you take your fairly average 1.3 kilometer detectability for torpedoes, at max rank you're going to get this to a little bit more than 1.4 kilometers. You'll be lucky if that's even pushing a quarter of a second of extra time for you to react. Though not always on, bumping that 1.3 kilometer detectability up to a maximum of 2.5-ish with Exposé gives you about twice as much time to dodge, which is realistically going to help you a lot more, because before it's too late usually only tells you when there are torpedoes near you after it's too late. In slot 3, I think your best choice is certainly punching through. The increase in AP damage alone is going to be nice. German cruisers already have exceptionally high damage AP shells, so 10% boost on top of that, when it's maxed out, is going to go even further on these ships versus ships of other nations. Unless a real strange ship comes out, I'm not really sure either of the other two here are really worth talking about too much, other than to say, between the two I'd probably choose Warships over Fortified. And that's just because German cruisers don't have incredible speed, so I'd probably notice and enjoy the extra knot here and there a little bit more than a fairly small reduction in incoming damage. To that end, I would say if you do want to play a more survivable cruiser, then I would just go for Gunther Lutyens, since he's going to give you a lot more survivability than this one skill will. In slot 4, I would keep with the offensive, preferring accuracy to maneuverability. In general, German cruisers' maneuverability isn't that bad, and though the Hipper and Prinz Eugen will get their engines taken out if anyone so much as looks at you wrong, I can't say that I've had too much trouble with my rudder being jammed. Being able to hit what I'm aiming at is therefore a pleasant bonus, while not night and day, particularly since German cruiser accuracy seems to be quite a bit better than German battleship accuracy. Fixated will reduce the size of your overall shell dispersion and help those shells tend a little bit more towards the middle of that dispersion. Both of these are positives. In your legendary slot, both of these skills are very useful, though one is useful at lower levels and one becomes a little bit more useful at higher levels. For pretty much anything that doesn't have a heal, I would recommend Refill Station, just to try to get as much hurt out there as quickly as possible. For ships like the Graf Spee or Hipper, fully packed becomes a much more useful option because you'll pick up a third heal, and though there are times you'll be able to get off 3 sonars at lower levels, the times that you need that, or a fourth plane for that matter, are relatively few and far between. When looking at any cross-class potential or non-traditional build, I think von Müller comes up a little short here. We'll start by pointing out the abilities that you just can't use with anything other than a cruiser. Note this does include his base trait. What you're left with is a collection of skills that could make an extremely paranoid Bismarck commander feel just a little bit better about being torpedoed, or a very visible utility destroyer, but the novelty of this seems to have no real use, and you'd be better off sharing a strange personal preference that you have with your division, perhaps a song that you really like that maybe people think you shouldn't. The inspirations that I would use for Karl von Müller are pretty straightforward, because I really do think the way to go on him is to lean into making your German guns really sing. For offense, perhaps the best choices are going to be, predictably, Norman Scott and Gunther Lutyens. Scott is going to help you hit more often. Again, German cruisers aren't inaccurate as German battleships, but they aren't exceptionally accurate either, so this is an overkill. Lutyens is going to help you hit harder, and since you've already got great AP damage, this is only going to help make your damage even that much more shocking to players who don't take you seriously. My second tier choices would also be about improving the guns, but they'd be more about utility, with Charles Madden making the German cruisers have a more comfortable, if not impressively fast, turret traverse speed. Another way of doing damage is penetrating more often. Both Yamamoto and von Essen will help under different situations. Yamamoto, where your penetration is coming up just a little short of going through the outer armor or penetrating into the enemy's citadel, and von Essen at angles near 45 degrees where you'd otherwise be subject to a bounce. Though in neither of these cases have I found the inspirations to create really night and day observable differences. Finally, one way to improve your odds at getting in close with a German cruiser is by not being spotted and deleted before you get there. So Makawa and Tversky, as always, have their uses. When considering when you'd want to use von Müller as an inspiration, the first thing I have to say is, obviously he doesn't help you if you're not driving a cruiser. This ability is going to improve your speed up to 5%, which is realistically about 2 knots for some of the fastest cruisers in the game. I won't say that speed never hurt anyone, because that's manifestly untrue, particularly where ships are concerned, but he's not a bad choice for cruisers. He can help make slow cruisers just a little bit more average, but as an inspiration I tend to find him most fun on ships that are already very fast, so mostly the Soviet and French cruisers. Speed is going to help you get to bases quicker, into range or out of range faster too. For everyone else but the Russian and the French though, I think there are probably better choices, and I would probably only recommend considering von Müller if you're confident in your build already. And with that out of the way, I think we've covered just about everything. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this little video on Karl von Müller. Thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
PlayStation